Hello and welcome back. Today we're looking at part 8 of my series on my soon-to-be published book, Becoming You. And today we're exploring one of the most misunderstood subjects in personal growth, and that's boundaries. Now, most people imagine boundaries are walls. They picture saying no, keeping people out, defending themselves. But I'd like you to think about them differently. Imagine that your inner world is a beautiful garden. And at the center of that garden is your inner child. It isn't weak, it isn't broken, but it is alive. And like anything alive, it needs the right conditions if it's going to flourish. It needs sunlight, it needs water, it needs care, and sometimes it needs protection. Every healthy garden has a boundary around it, not because the garden hates the outside world, not because nobody's welcome, but because without some kind of boundary, everything eventually wanders in. People trample the flowers without even noticing, animals eat the young shoots, weeds begin to spread. Before long, the garden no longer reflects the care of the gardener. It simply becomes whatever everyone else leaves behind. And that's exactly what happens emotionally when we have no boundaries. Other people's expectations become more important than our own needs. Other people's emergencies become our responsibility. Other people's opinions begin to sound like our own thoughts. Little by little, we stop tending our own lives. We become caretakers of everyone else's. Now, here's where the filial psyche, my model of psychotherapy, becomes so important. Who is actually looking after the garden? For many of us, it isn't the inner nurturing parent, it's the inner critic. And the critic makes a terrible gardener. Sometimes it leaves the gate permanently open because it's terrified people won't like us if we say no. It whispers, don't disappoint them, they'll leave, good people always help. So everyone walks in, everyone leaves footprints, and then the inner critic blames us for feeling exhausted. Other times the inner critic does the opposite. It slams the gate shut, nobody gets in, nobody gets close. The garden becomes isolated, safe perhaps, but lonely. Neither of these are healthy boundaries. One sacrifices yourself to keep everyone else comfortable, and the other sacrifices connection to avoid being hurt. The inner nurturing parent chooses something completely different. The nurturing parent simply becomes the gardener. A good gardener doesn't apologize for pulling weeds. They don't feel guilty for closing the gate at night. They don't wonder whether every plant deserves the same amount of water. They understand something simple. If they don't care for their garden, there won't be a garden left to share. Think about your own life for a moment. Perhaps someone asks you for another favor when you're already exhausted. The old pattern immediately appears. You hear yourself saying yes, even though every part of you is quietly saying no. Or perhaps you withdraw completely because you can't face another demand. Both reactions come from fear. Neither comes from care. The nurturing parent pauses, looks around the garden, checks on the inner child first, and then answers, not from guilt, not from anger, but from responsibility. I'm sorry, I can't do that today. I need some time before I answer. That doesn't work for me. Notice how different those words feel. They aren't rejecting another person, they're protecting something precious. And here's something I think many people overlook. The first boundary we ever learn isn't with other people, it's with ourselves. More specifically, it's with the inner critic. Every time the inner critic begins telling the inner child, you're useless, you've let everyone down, you should be better than this, the nurturing parent steps between them, almost like a gardener, shielding a young plant from a harsh wind. No, we don't speak to the child like that anymore. That too is a boundary. In fact, it may be the most important boundary of all, because the way you allow yourself to be treated internally eventually becomes the standard for how you allow yourself to be treated externally. So here's your practice for this week. Don't try to build a fortress, simply become the gardener. Choose one small gate you've been leaving open. Perhaps it's answering messages immediately. Perhaps it's saying yes when you mean no. Perhaps it's allowing someone to speak to you in ways you wouldn't accept for someone you love. This week, close the gate just once, calmly, kindly, without apology, and then notice what happens. The inner critic will almost certainly predict disaster. It always does. But listen a little more carefully. Beneath all that noise, see if you can hear another voice, the quiet relief of your inner child. The feeling that perhaps for the first time in a very long time, someone is looking after the garden. Because boundaries aren't about shutting people out. They're about creating conditions in which you can finally grow. And when you grow, the people who genuinely love you don't lose access to you. They simply meet a healthier version of you. Well, thanks for joining me. I'll see you next time when we'll explore how all of these parts begin to work together as one whole person, the person you were always meant to become. Until next time.